Well, hello, welcome back to Supposedly Fun. I am Greg, here today to do a wrap-up for Women in Translation Month, which was August, and it is now September, so I'm a little behind on this, but I decided I wanted to take this opportunity to get to some books that I had been wanting to read for a while, and some authors that I had been wanting to read. My method for doing that was to see which ones were immediately available on audiobook from Libby, my library app. And the result is that I got 3 books all by Asian authors. I had wanted to branch out into a different part of the world a little bit, but that's just the way it worked out. So the first book that I read for Women in Translation Month was Convenience Store Woman by Sayaka Murata, translated by Ginny Tapley Takamori. This is a fun, kind of quirky little book, and I say little meaning that it's only about 3 or 4 hours on audio. I don't know what the page count would be, but it's a slim little book. So this is about Keiko Furakura, who gets a job in a convenience store while she's at university. 18 years later, at age 36, Keiko is still working at the convenience store, and people are starting to act weird to her about it. She's getting pressure from her family and her friends to grow up and do something different, and she has to start making excuses, even to random people, about why she has been there for so long, and it's just becoming awkward all around. The truth is that Keiko really loves the store, and it's the only place she feels that she can fit in. She understands the language of the store. She really just understands the layout and how to please the customers. I couldn't help but think of Helen Mirren's character in Gosford Park, who has a monologue about being the perfect servant, and how in order to be the perfect servant, you have to anticipate what people are going to want. You have to know what they want before they even know it. And you have to, in some ways, be invisible. You provide the service and the support without actually interfering with them. And Keiko really gets that, I think. This is a good job for her because she is really good at anticipating, and she's really good at being efficient, to the point where she almost disappears into the background, which is kind of what she wants. She's a fascinating character because she's borderline sociopathic. I mean, let's be real. In a minor way. She's not a danger to anyone. She's not a danger to herself. She just doesn't really understand people or emotion or how any of those things work. She has this extreme difficulty understanding social cues, and she doesn't understand how people expect her to act. She frequently describes that she is speaking in someone else's voice. Like, basically, she's doing an imitation of the way other people speak, and she's picking and choosing which voice she imitates for each situation because she sees how people react to that person. So if she wants to be a little stern, she'll imitate somebody else because they know that people respect that person and the way she speaks. If she wants to seem a little comedic, she'll interpret somebody else's voice because she sees people laugh at that person. So she'll imitate the way they speak, which is it's a very interesting thing, and it comes across very well in the book. Things come to a head for Keiko when another man who is not quite made for this world, but in a more Bartleby the Scrivener type way, comes to work at the convenience store and upends Keiko's life. It is a delightful book. I absolutely recommend the audio because it's really well performed. I think the ending is a bit predictable, but since the story is so light and so different in other ways, I don't really mind that. Even though I kind of knew where it was going, I really appreciated the journey, and I think the journey is really what this book is about. The next book I read was The Vegetarian by Han Kang, and I'm going to hold up a physical copy of this, even though I listened to it on audio, because I have the physical copy of it, and I have for a while. I just hadn't gotten around to reading it, so I used the audio as an excuse. So this is translated by Deborah Smith. I had been really, 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 really looking forward to reading this for a long time. And maybe the anticipation factor worked against this book. You know how you have an idea of how you think something is going to be, and then when you actually read it or watch it, it's decidedly not what you thought it was going to be. And then you have to reconcile the two versions of the book, the one you expected and the one that it is. That's kind of me with The Vegetarian. And it's not to say that I think my interpretation of what the story should have been is correct. It's just that it's hard sometimes to balance what you expected. So this book follows what happens after a woman refuses to eat meat after she has a nightmare. The story is told in shifting perspectives, and as it progresses, her sort of passive rebellion grows more and more extreme, and people keep trying to force her back into eating meat. I thought parts of the plot were a little clunky, if I'm being honest. and didn't really make that much sense, which is an odd thing to say about a book that isn't altogether concerned with realism and being natural. Um, it's not quite, and I think part of it is that I don't know how to reconcile the tone. It's not quite satire. It's not quite a horror story. It's not a domestic drama. So I don't know where I really end up with this book. I just don't know. All I really know is that I just didn't really enjoy it very much in the end, which was again disappointing because I really had high hopes for this book. I first heard of it when the New York Times had picked it for one of their 10 best books of the year. And it just sounded like a really great story about a woman in Korea who is trying to assert her own independence, her own choice, her own authority in a way, and is just being crushed by society. But and I think that's where my expectation did not match what's in the book, because I was really looking forward to that story, and I didn't quite get it. So that's The Vegetarian. The last book that I got in for Women in Translation Month was Please Look After Mom by Kyung-Suk Shin. This is translated by Chi Young Kim. Sorry, I had to look at the names. This was my favorite of the three. It is about a 69-year-old woman who is separated from her husband in a subway station in Seoul, and she vanishes. The novel moves from the perspectives of the people who have been in this woman's family, her son, her daughter, her husband, and then eventually the woman herself. And in doing so, it creates a portrait of this family and this complex relationship that they have with each other, and especially that they have with their mother. It is really a portrait of how the family and how society in general treats the mother and how it treats women in general. I saw a lot of reviews that compared this book to Rashomon. In fact, I think the description of the book itself compares it to Rashomon, because each narrator tells a different story and has a different interpretation of their mother and their life with their mother, and you see the same event portrayed different ways throughout the book. Not in a repetitive way, in a way that really reveals a lot, and I enjoyed that a great deal. I think another book that did that well is A Place for Us by Fatima Farheen Mirza, which is one of my two favorite book reads of the year so far. What's really interesting is the portrayal of the mother through all of these different versions. She's someone who no one has really seen or appreciated, even though she performed a vital role in their life. None of them really have any idea who they are, and if they spoke to each other, they would see they all had drastically different opinions of who she was and what she was doing and whether she liked what she was doing. Even her husband describes actively ignoring her at times and not seeing her. It's only in her absence that they appreciate her presence, which is a really interesting dynamic. I will say parts of the book are a bit predictable, and I can see how someone might describe it as a bit slow-moving. But frankly, I was really swept away by the story. I think there's a lot of very nuanced writing that flows effortlessly, and Kyung-Suk Shin makes some really surprisingly poignant observations. Part of me felt a little cynical going into this book, like just going into it, I felt like I know what to expect from this book. And while in many ways I was right, the experience was still startling and vibrant, and I am very much looking forward to reading more books by Kyung-Suk Shin. I think the writing here is very smart and subtle, and it makes you think it's easy, but there's a lot going on underneath the surface, and I really enjoyed that a lot. So those are the three books I managed to get in time for Women in Translation Month. I did just start the audio of My Brilliant Friend by Elena Ferrante, and yes, I do have a physical copy of this book as well. I just hadn't gotten around to reading it in such a long time that I figured I might as well just try the audio. This one was not available. So this is the only one that would have been by a non-Asian author. Elena Ferrante is Italian, so this is translated from that, and the translator of this is not on the cover. So let's see who it is. Translated from the Italian by Anne Goldstein. So I'm starting the month of September with another Women in Translation Month book just outside of the month. And so far I'm enjoying that as well. So I would love to hear what you read for Women in Translation Month. If you've read any of these, I'd love to hear your opinion. Maybe you have some things I should reconsider about The Vegetarian. And I hope you're having a good reading week so far. I always appreciate your time watching this video. Thank you so much for that. And I'll be back. Until then, happy reading.